Last month, Yellowstone supervolcano had a quake swarm of 125 tremors. It's an area, as we know, already weakened by magmatic activity. And this is what the chamber looks like. The magma chamber is about 3 miles down if you're standing there, if you were lucky enough to visit this. And under the magma chamber, there is a magma reservoir that extends all the way down to coming from Baja California. And this is a map of it. It comes from Baja California. The western part, it's like a Y shape. The western part goes under San Andreas and Walker Lane Fault System. And the eastern part of that branch comes from Baja California, goes into Utah, goes straight up into Yellowstone supervolcano area, and then turns west and is, as we can see from this graph here, under Idaho. And this is where we've been having quake swarms since March of this year. 5.7 hit Utah on March 17, and then on the night of March 31st, a 6.5 hit Idaho. And this is the imaginary 7 line that we can see coming from Baja up through Utah into Yellowstone and under Idaho. And this is the area of the Caldera. As we can see on the 4 o'clock area, we see Yellowstone Lake. And that jutting water part going west is West Thumb Lake. That's where we've had the 125 earthquakes in the swarm that hit in a space of about a few days. As we know, it's a supervolcano. And it's called a supervolcano because it can inflict a very big danger to the world. It erupted 1 million years ago, 1.3 million years ago, and 640,000 years ago with those 3 supervolcanoes. Now, this quake swarm lasted in a 6-day period between September 10th and 16 with a total of 125 tremors, according to USGS. And we'll see how Mike Poland explains that to us. The update comes amid unfolding fears that this supervolcano, one of the Earth's biggest, which has not had a major blast since a super eruption 640,000 years ago, could be overdue for another eruption. One person says, if you all think that 2020 can get worse, what happens if Yellowstone can have a super eruption any time? There is no evidence to suggest Yellowstone is going to erupt now or in the foreseeable future, even with large earthquake swarms striking the supervolcano. As Mike Poland, a geologist in charge of Yellowstone, explains, this is part of the natural activity of Yellowstone. Mike Poland, chief scientist, says the swarm of September was a fairly uneventful event. The 8 strongest quakes in that swarm only hit about magnitude 2.5, and 69 tremors were in the magnitude of 1 region. The earthquakes are like this in swarms, account for about half of all seismicity in the Yellowstone area. And this Yellowstone Volcano Observatory monthly roundup of activity for September, the scientist explains in detail what happened last month. He says it was a nice little swarm located just south of West Thumb Lake, south of Yellowstone Lake, that is, and north of Mount Sheridan. Most of it occurred September 10th. There were 90-odd earthquakes that occurred that day, but it lingered on into September 16. And overall, there were about 125 quakes that occurred in that swarm. And that may sound like a lot, but it's actually part of the course for Yellowstone kind of background activity, and it's normal. Yellowstone has lots of seismic swarms. He says there are about 1,500 to 2,500 earthquakes every year in Yellowstone. The seismicity is related to the presence of faults within the Earth's crust, and the September swarm struck at an intersection between the Yellowstone Caldera, bounding faults, and Mount Sheridan fault zone. Mike Poland said, so all of these faults, plus all of that water moving around on the surface, and the fact that the area is weak overall because of all the earthquake activity and magmatic activity over time, means that earthquake swarms are really common. These rapid-fire sequences of earthquakes, basically in the same general area, They get a lot of notoriety when they happen, but they happen all the time in Yellowstone. This is what Mike Poland explains. In 2017, for instance, 3-month-long swarm hit about 2,400 earthquakes, with 300 occurring in one day. And even then, the seismicity was not considered a sign of a brewing eruption. So this is what happened for September. This is by Sebastian Kentley, Express UK. And let's go and see what Mike Poland said in his announcement for the September activity.
I'm Mike Poland, Science in Charge of the Yellowstone Volcano Observatory. This is the monthly update for October 1st of 2020. Now, Yellowstone was in the news during the month of September. You may have heard there was an earthquake swarm centered really around September 10th. It actually lingered into September 16th. And before we get into talking about what happened overall during the month, I wanted to talk about this swarm. It was a nice little swarm located just south of West Sump, south of Yellowstone Lake, and north of Mount Sheridan. Most of it occurred on September 10th. There were 90-odd earthquakes that occurred that day. But it lingered on into September 16th. And overall, there were about 125 earthquakes that occurred in that swarm. Now, that may sound like a lot, but that's actually par for the course for Yellowstone. Kind of background activity. Yellowstone has lots and lots of seismic swarms. There are about 1,500 to 2,500 earthquakes every year in Yellowstone, and about half of these occur as seismic swarms. This seismicity is related to the fact that there's faults all over the place in Yellowstone. This particular swarm here occurred at the intersection between the Caldera, Yellowstone Caldera's bounding faults, and the Mount Sheridan fault zone. So all of these faults, plus all that water moving around the surface, and the fact that the area is weak overall because of all the earthquake activity and magmatic activity over time, means that earthquake swarms are really common. These swarms are clusters of earthquakes in time and space, so rapid-fire sequences of earthquakes, basically in the same general area. So they get a lot of notoriety when they happen, but they happen all the time in Yellowstone, and really that's sort of what Yellowstone does. In fact, in 2017, there was a 3-month-long swarm that included 2,400 earthquakes. And one day had 300 of them, the maximum of which was a magnitude 4.4. The maximum of this swarm on September 10th was a magnitude 2.8. So this is sort of what Yellowstone does, and these kinds of swarms happen all the time.
If you'd like to join me on my Patreon account, you will hear content not covered by mainstream media. These riveting stories will be based on my research, and I will state my opinions and give my personal insight on diverse and controversial subjects and world events not covered by mainstream media, and not supported by YouTube guidelines. So whatever I have on my Patreon, most of those will not be on my YouTube channel. Please consider becoming a member today. More of the most significant and important videos will be on my Patreon channel. Your support helps me to continue my research and keeps this YouTube channel alive. And we depend on your support, your generous charity, because we help economically challenged families here in Athens, Greece, in Kapota, and we also help the young generation with university tuition and the community around our church. Thank you.